Motion pictures, can't get enough. Cinephile, movie lover, and a big movie buff. Talking to actors, directors, innovators, athletes to writers, real trailblazers. Yeah, originator, not a duplicator. So honest, always authentic. Tune in, trust me, you don't want to miss it. This is the Monday Morning Critic. Amazing life journeys, great interviews from sports analysts, even reporters too. Captivating, always top content, bringing top quality. Everybody's talking. Yeah, originator, not a duplicator. So passionate and so authentic. Tune in, trust me, you don't want to miss it. This is the Monday Morning Critic. Woo!
Welcome to the Monday Morning Critic podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today, whether you're streaming the episode or simply downloaded it. Either way, I'm very appreciative of it. Usually I do not give a prologue to my interviews. I just let them stand on their own. And as many of you know who have been with me since the beginning, you know the only guests I have on my show are ones that move me, ones whose work has brought me to a level of appreciation that I cannot explain in words. And oftentimes during my interviews, it almost sounds like I don't know what the right word is. I'm being over the top with my compliments and my sentiment, but that is so far from how I feel. I am just, if anything, I lack the proper verbiage and a way to articulate how I truly feel about a person and their work. No more so than my next guest is Joseph DeBeese. He is one of the most talented film score composers there are, and he was so kind. I said to him, I'm putting together the interview during the edit, and I would really love if you just could send me a couple of the tracks that has not been released yet on the movie Alpha, because Joseph scored the movie Alpha. He was so kind to send me a couple tracks. One you're going to hear when I'm done talking, which is Alpha Follows Kata, and then one which concludes the interview, which is Alpha's theme. And I am just, when he sent that, along with some kind words, I just blown away. Like, that's, is there any better currency than like kindness and somebody just saying just the nicest things? I don't know. To me, that just blows me away. And in a time where podcasts are a dime a dozen, I think my passion puts me over the top and truly, if anything, if nothing else, introduces you to guests that are at the top of their game and some of the best in what they do. So without going any further, please welcome my next guest, Joseph DeBeese. My next guest filmography includes Dirty Dancing, What's Eating Gilbert Grape, The Book of Eli, Prisoners, Sicario, Revenant, Wind River, American Sniper, Alpha. He's a composer, he's an actor, he's a music editor. Supremely talented gentleman, Joseph DeBisi. Joe, how's it going today?
Oh, hi, Derek. It's going very well. Thank you so much for having me.
So, yeah, I am. I got to tell you, the second composer I've had on the air, and I'm going to get to that in a moment.
Okay.
So you went to UMass. Is that Amherst or was that Boston?
I went to UMass in Amherst for 3 semesters.
Okay, so that's like a 20-minute bike ride from my house. So you're kind of a Western Mass guy in a way because you went to school out here. And then you went to Berkeley. Talk a little bit about that, Joe, the early years, going to UMass, deciding, you know what, maybe, this is a great school and all, but, it's probably not best for me and what I want to do moving forward.
Sure. I went to UMass primarily because I had a hockey scholarship. I was recruited to play hockey.
Wow.
And so I was prepping and getting myself in shape all throughout the summer. And my freshman year there, once the semester started, the coach called, and I honestly don't remember his name at this time, and told me that he was leaving the program. And I was a bit devastated. And so I went to at that point, I didn't even know, now, do I need to try out? What's happening? I didn't know who the new coach was. There was no, transition at all. And I went to a couple of practices, and I realized, it just wasn't the joy and the love for the game anymore. And I decided just to focus on music because that was my major as well. And so I was a trumpet player. I did not get into the music department my first semester, which was also a shock. And I saw the caliber of trumpet players and brass players and musicians at UMass. And at that time, was studying under the late Walter Chestnut, and fantastic. I just had nothing but praise for that man. He taught me. He was the head of the brass department, and he took me under his wing and taught me privately and got me into the department. I mean, he just really helped me as a trumpet player. And then once I was in, I realized I was on to be a classical trumpet player to play in symphonies or to be a music teacher. And I realized, well, that's not the track I wanted to go for. And so I had another trumpet player friend of mine who was into jazz, and I got an introduction into jazz playing at that time. And he was like, I'm going to go to Berkeley. You want to go? And I'm like, it just felt right. It just felt like the right thing to do. So I went, I transferred, got into Berklee College of Music after my audition, and within the first 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, there was a trumpet seminar to be given by a high school student. And I was like, well, I want to check this out. Now, you got to know, at Berklee, there's not a whole lot of brass players. And it's mostly, rhythm section people, sax players. I'm sure now it's much more diverse, actually. We were just there doing a seminar last week, and the school has just exploded. It's huge. It's amazing. But anyway, probably about 20 of us trumpet players show up to watch this high school student come out on stage and play jazz, play classical, double tonguing, triple tonguing, circular breathing. It was like he blew our doors off. Totally threw me into crisis. Didn't know what I was going to do with myself because I wanted to be a performer, and I just saw this kind of playing. So the next 3 or 4 nights I spent just walking around Boylston Street. You go to your classes during the day, you have your dinner, you walk around, and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. I don't know what to do. And so it was a lot of soul searching. And then one of those evenings, I was walking down an alley or something around Berkeley, and I heard music that just lit up my soul. I didn't know what it was, but it was just gorgeous. And so I followed it down this alley, and it was on the second story window rather, and it was nighttime, so I didn't know what it was. So the next day, I got up to see what the building was, and it was a Berkeley building. I walked in there, went up to the second floor. I think it was the second floor, but it was an administration building, but there was this other department in there. It was called film scoring. Didn't even know Berkeley had a film scoring department, let alone you can get a degree in it. And I changed my major, and that was the beginning. And I still love film music today.
Yeah, and I heard you tell a story before, Joe. It was you heard a particular trumpet player, and you were like,
"Oh, right, yeah." This is it. That trumpet player was Wynton Marsalis, so.
who's pretty good.
He's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
But it's funny how life works. That things in life that come at you that are sometimes difficult, or not sometimes, they are difficult. It has a way of pointing you in the direction that is the proper direction for your life.
Yeah, that's really well said. And I was going to joke saying that you and I have three things in common. I also went to college in Boston. I also played the trumpet for about 2 weeks because in fifth grade my cheeks hurt too much, so I quit. And we're both hockey players. But I have to say, before we get on to your amazing life here, I wanted to bring up one more Western Mass thing. So you said in an email that you spent a year in Chicopee. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. I did live in Chicopee for about a year. Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I had the other composer I had on, his name is Chris Spellman, and he's from Westfield. And Chris has done Lost City of Z, a couple other great movies. And I find it ironic, the two composers that are supremely talented that I've had on my show are literally two exits down from me. So I thought
that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's wild.
Two really talented. We're talking like your resume is unbelievable. His is equally as amazing. So it's like, how weird is that?
It's a small world. You never know.
It certainly is. So okay, so you go to Berkeley, and then I didn't even know Berkeley has and correct me if I'm misstating this. It's a film score department.
It is. They have a film scoring department. At the time that I attended, it was in its infancy. I think it may have been third year, or something like that. And now it's. I think when we were there last week, I think the chair of the department was telling me that I think they have 300 students in all for it's a 4-year program, so I think there are 300 students in the film scoring department, and I think at the time when I graduated, it may have been like 30. So, things are a little different.
Yeah, and I have to say, I love film scores. That's all I listened to as a kid. Everyone thought I was weird because I would listen to what they said, quote unquote, music with no vocals. But I love it. It gets to my heart, right? So, and the more I researched your life, the more I realized how much I didn't know about movie scores. And I know a lot. Like if I hear, so the other day we're listening to, we were watching Castle Rock, and I know I've heard this piece of music. And it was in the movie Arrival. It's a very beautiful piece. Like, I'm really good like that. But then when I'm researching your life, I'm reading things like temporary scores, underscores. I have no idea what any of that is. Like, I felt embarrassed for how much I really don't know, Joseph.
Oh, well, I mean, I wouldn't feel embarrassed about it. The thing is that film scores over the years have changed. The sound of them changed a lot because of how the vibe of music changes, and what people like to hear, and also what technology is brought into it. And so, temporary scores was not something that was always the case in films. Where when I first started, there was no such thing as doing temporary scores, or what we just call a temp score, and at that time, a composer would work on a film. Like I worked with Marvin Hamlish on 3 films, and just absolutely loved my time with him. Although I do have a funny story. I don't know how much time we have, but can I share this funny story?
Joe, we have as much time as you'd like. You're my guest. Yes, absolutely.
So So I have a friend of mine, this was all in New York, and a friend of mine in LA had called me and said, so Marvin's working on a film, and it was 3 Men and a Baby. He says, and I can't be out there. Could you go and spend time with him at his apartment? And while he's, he's writing the score. And so I would just basically sub for my friend for a couple of days. I'm like, well, sure. I mean, this would be amazing. So I get to Marvin's apartment, and so he's on Fifth Avenue, where he was, and he's on go in, and he's got one of the rooms set up with back at the time we were doing Moviola, so everything was on film, and it was a scene. He was writing the music around the scene where the three men were singing to the baby in the crib, "Good night, my sweetheart," right? So he was going to write the accompaniment around that. So he asked me, he said, hey, what is the key that these guys are singing in? So my first response was, well, I'm sure my friend, wrote that in the notes. That's part of the job of a music editor. So I checked it, and he did. And my memory, I seem to think it was an A-flat major, but I could be wrong. I don't know. That's what kind of pokes out right now. I said, but I can check it. And the way to check that, this gets a little technical, so I'll do my best to explain it. A moviola, okay, so this machine that just runs film. It doesn't run at true sound speed. It's a motor. It just runs close to sound speed. And so if you want to get a pitch, you have to actually make it run sound speed, because if it goes faster, the pitch is higher. If it gets slower, the pitch is lower. So how are you going to be able to tell? So they have this thing, the moviola, as it moves, there's this little flywheel at the end, and it spins. And they devised this thing where it's like a stroboscope, and you put it on there, and it has little triangles of black, white, black, white, black, white. And as it spins under a fluorescent light, you can see if it's moving, kind of like, gosh, I don't know how even else to describe it. But you can see if the triangles are moving or standing still. It's kind of like, back in the day in the turntable, you had that little thing with the blocks of white and black. And if they were stationary, you knew it was going at the proper speed. It was very same principle. And so I had to use fluorescent lights. Well, I'm in Marvin's apartment. He doesn't have fluorescent lights except for the lights that were shining up at his Oscars. So I'm like, Marvin, can I turn these lights down onto the moviola? And I had to pull this big machine to get close. And he's yes, sure. And he would go back and forth. He'd go in, he'd come out, he'd go in and come out. He was always in motion. So he would leave. So I would do that, and it still wasn't dark enough for me to see because there was a huge picture window overlooking Fifth Avenue, and at the time the piano was against that window. So when he comes in, I'm like, Marvin, would you mind if I pulled the shades down? And that way I could get the room a little darker. That way I can see. And he's like, yeah, whatever. And he's in and out, in and out. He's out. So I lean over his piano, yank on the sash cord, and all of the blinds come flying off the wall, tumbling down all over the piano, plaster everywhere. And I'm devastated. He comes in. What's happening? What's going on? And I'm like, I just pulled the sash cord. I mean, I could not speak fast enough. And within 30 seconds, I was out and the door slammed in my face. And I thought my career was over.
Oh, my God.
I mean, because at the time, Marvin was the composer. He did The Way We Were. He was like, he was just hot. And I just blew it. And so I go back to my office and I call my friend in LA and I told him the story I just told you. And my buddy just laughs and laughs and he laughs and says, don't worry about it. That's just Marvin. I'll smooth it out. Don't sweat it. So I thought, I'll never work with Marvin again. So I never heard anything more about it. And about 7-8 months go by and I get this call from a producer to work on a film. And he says, and Marvin's the composer. And I said, well, does he know you're calling me? And he says, yeah, he does. And he's in L.A. This is when I lived in Stamford, Connecticut at the time. And he says, he's in L.A. at the Four Seasons. He's expecting your call. Here's the number. So I'm like, well, how do you play this? You know, like you destroyed the guy's room. He kicked you out. And now you're supposed to be working together. How's this going to work? And I don't know. I just had this thought, let's just not bring it up unless he brings it up. Let's just, you know, we're professionals. Let's just move on and move forward. So I call. He gets on the phone. He goes, hello. And I'm like, hey, Marvin, this is, you know, I tell him who I am. And he goes, I remember you. I'm like, oh my God. And I just said, hi, Marvin, how you been? And he says, I'm doing great. And then he just totally gets into what's going on in the project. And it was fabulous. He was very gracious. And we ended up doing a couple of other movies together. It was great.
Joseph, how funny is it how things end up working out like that?
You know, sometimes I think we take everything too serious. And it was a serious situation. But at the same time, it was an innocent situation, you know. It's Marvin Hamlish. Your blind should not be falling out of your wall. Just saying.
Yeah, you're right. and so I have a bunch of questions about what you just said, but before I go on, so explain. We talked a bit about this, but so explain a temp score. Like I'm a 7-year-old and I don't get it. Like what is a temp score?
Okay, right. I got off the path to tell you the Marvin story, but basically, going back. Prior to doing temps, a composer like Marvin would write the music, have a director come over, play it on a piano, or if they're not pianists like Marvin, hire a pianist, and you talk it through. And you talk about what the music's going to do here, and you play it against, you'd even run the moviola, and all the piano's playing, you get a rough sync of it. And then you go and, you get little notes here and there, and then you go and record the music. And that's the first time you really hear it with an orchestra or live instruments or whatever the colors are going to be. And what's happened over the period of time was that a lot of the studios were hearing the scores for the first time as they were recording it. And sometimes they didn't like it. And that's a lot of money spent on all these musicians. And the score gets thrown away and the composer gets replaced and a new composer comes on. And so what out of that grew the idea, what if we started cutting in other scores that are close to the idea of what we're hoping this music soundtrack will sound like? And so a music editor would then start collecting scores. And at that time, I had just thousands of CDs of scores, and I'll get them transferred to Mag, or now it's all digitized. But you start editing in the music, and you start doing your own creative version of a score from pre-recorded scores to see how it plays with the scene, and creating a style and a vibe. Which it's very hard for a composer to come in on that, because now that creative part, that's, the initial creative part for a composer, it's like already been done, and that's hard for a composer, because it's kind of like, now can you do something like that or better? And it's like, wow, geez, that, okay. So that, and they started doing screenings to do test screenings of the movie. And so that was also another reason to show a movie with a test screening, to have music support it, because you can't really screen a film if there was no music in the scene. It would really feel flat, and you couldn't really tell whether the scene was working or not. So between those two things, temp scores were birthed, and it really put a lot of creativity onto the music editor to work very closely with the director. And because my background is in composition, and that's what I've always wanted to do, it really lent itself for me to do really good temp scores. You did a great, so you're doing an awesome job. Like, now I understand exactly what. Have you ever had a temp score that? And I'm sorry to cut you off, but I have to say this before. Have you ever had a temp score where it was so good you incorporated it in the movie instead of making it just something that you use for that time? Yeah, there are actually two films that I won't mention names of, that I can tell you that the final score is like a knockoff of the temp score.
Gotcha.
Because it worked, and it's not so much like a big kudos to me, because, you know, the other thing to remember is that I'm editing music that another composer wrote. But what I was able to do is see how, with my sensibilities, is to see how that music works so well with this scene. And it works so well. And what happens, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, is that the director and the studio, they get this thing that we call temp love. And they love how that temp music is working so well that when a new score comes in, that works just as effective. Like, it does the job, and it has the emotion, and it moves you. It's just not the same as the temp, because the temp is like the first creation of it, you know?
Right.
And a lot of times directors fall in love with that first bit of creation that's like, here's my scene, now I'm cutting it, now this music is working, oh my gosh, this is perfect. And then it's very hard to put a new piece of music in there and something that feels perfect.
Yeah. I mean, and so just let me ask you before I forget, an underscore would be what then? If a temp score is...
Well, so an underscore is, boy, how do you... So, like on American Sniper, we had some source music, and we had Clint wrote some piano pieces, and then I wrote all of the underscore. And so the underscore is, I guess, what we would call it, the dramatic narrative that emotionally supports the scene. Most soundtracks or most film scores are underscore. It's just another way of saying the same thing, but it does have a direct usage. You know, it's like background instrumental. It supports the scene. So underscore is pretty much the same thing as writing a score for a film. But sometimes you could be writing a piece of score for a film that is also like a source music cue, you know?
Right. So help me understand, right? And by the way, I mean, you've done some fantastic... Your filmography is so amazing, Joseph. I mean, I'm looking at this.
Thank you.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like you don't get enough credit. So when I see music editor, right, and I know you have a large part to do, like all these movies that you were in, I'm going to say at least 85-90% of these are in my iPhone. I've bought it on iTunes. Like, how much do you have to do it? So let's say Prisoners and Sicario, by the way, rest in peace, Johan Johansson. My God.
I know.
Jesus.
It was a shocker. It's devastating, and just terribly, terribly sad. Because Johan was a wonderful human being, kind, gracious, talented, and so when I got to work with him on Prisoners, music editors are like, we serve the director and we serve the composer. You know, you're kind of you're a translator and you're a bridge, and you know, there are times when the composer is not around and the director needs to talk about some things that are happening in the scene. And so you're working with the composer very closely, and you know what the composer's intentions are. So you're supporting the composer to make sure things are translating. And for me, especially, I'm often trying to get the two of them to communicate. So I'd be like, well, you know, have you called the composer? Have you expressed that to the composer? Sometimes some directors are shy about talking to the composer that way, in a way that they feel maybe they don't have the musical terms, or they would ask, would I do something like that, or can I communicate that? So it can get a little sticky by being in the middle, but at the same time, that's the gig. And it's like, you know, if we don't put meaning to things in terms of like, oh, this can be politically awkward, and just do the job, it's fine. Like, you know, it's just you stick with the facts, you know. This is the deal, this is what we got to do. And so there's that kind of technical aspect, and then there's the creative aspect with working with the composer, as the composer will talk to you about what they're creating, and you're feeding back about, narratively what the scene's doing, as well as the composer's doing that. And there's just this semi-collaboration that happens as they write, and because of my background as a composer as well, I can speak the language, and all the way to preparing it for recording and being at the recording session, and being an extra set of ears to say, well, that was a good take, or that one, some intonation issues, or this performance has some nice emotion, and then being able to hold that, that space and bring it to the mix session and carry all that into technically knowing, well, how do we want to put this into stems so that when we go to the dub stage, we're mixing it, and there's control for the mixer to be able to navigate around dialogue or sound effects without destroying the musical integrity. So there's, you're just really involved. You're just full on with it.
Yeah, and you mentioned Prisoners. My God, what an unbelievable score! That it's so intense. It's so awesome. And so I have to say, so let's just take a movie like that. So Prisoners, Johann, supremely talented. How much of that final product do you contribute to? And I bet it probably changes from movie to movie. But let's just say Prisoners. Like, I know you're the in between to like the director and the composer. But like, do you ever? There's so many questions I have even from this. Like, are you ever not infuriated, but do you feel like your contribution, like how much of that? I'm saying the word like a 15-year-old girl here. So. you have. I'm trying to find a way to phrase this properly. So, how much of the final product have you contributed to in a case like Prisoners? Right, you're supremely talented. You've got this unbelievable, eye and ear for music. How much of that? How does that work out? Because I know your job as a music editor. I totally get what you do, but how much of your influence is impacted in the final score?
I guess it's depending upon how we want to define influence, because truly a music editor's role is to support the vision of the director and the composer. And so if the score comes out to be a successful score, I'm satisfied knowing that they're happy with their result. You know what I'm saying? It's not there. There is not a bit of like, oh yeah, that A flat, man, that's mine. No, no, it doesn't work that way,
right?
And it shouldn't work that way. What a lot of times, because picture changes after scoring, or picture changes maybe a week of scoring. You're in there now taking these stems and re-editing and re-sculpting or stretching or compressing, and you're reworking a cue that was already recorded and maintaining that integrity and still having it work against picture. That's very, very satisfying. That's something that there are times I can look at that and I go, yeah, I know I helped make that.
Right.
Again, I'm not going to mention any films, but I will say that there was a film that where the directors were with us when we recorded, and so what we're on the dub stage, they just all of a sudden felt like the piece of music wasn't working, and it was a bit of an action scene, plus it was a dramatic scene, and there was a death in it, and I had to, on the dub stage, the composer at that point, their job is done. It's been delivered. Now I had to take and edit all, like a whole new cue from the existing pieces of music from the film. That's very satisfying because you know where the bones are buried, so you can go into different stems. You can create a piece of music that now works, that the directors really like, and I got to show it to the composer to have the composer sign off. And when those two things happen, that's beautiful. That's a wonderful additional contribution. Because I don't want to say it goes above and beyond, because as music editors, we're asked to do that a lot. Because things change, or people change their mind, or who knows, and I mean, that happened on Alpha. Unfortunately, I was composing, so it was easy for me to just change my own music. Yeah, but there's never a point where I've ever looked on any film and I go, I certainly didn't get enough credit there.
Yeah, and I think I misphrased it, but you definitely answered it the way I guess so. I'm looking at like the Prisoner soundtrack. It's amazing, right? So through the Falling Snow is about as good as music gets on any movie, right? So that track. So is it? Are you more concerned with how the music fits into a movie? So something like that. Is that all Johan? Is that like you and Johan, that track? So, I mean, I come from a non-music background, so I must sound absolutely ridiculous phrasing these questions, but it's so hard because I don't have the words necessary, I feel like. So,
right.
So how would you, in this case, so through the Falling Snow, does he ever say to you, hey, Joseph, I'm working on this. How do you think this applies to this scene?
With Johan specifically, no. Johan, what he would do is he would send. Let me try to go back on Prisoners now, because he would already be working with Denis before I even came on board. So with that, he's been writing music and sending things to Denis. And they had already established a rapport and a communication, which is fantastic. You don't want to get in the middle of that. That's the way it rolls. You want that, and you want to support that. So in that situation, he would not be sending me a cue prior to sending it to Denis. It would be, he's already established this kind of tonality, and he would send me really an updated version of it, to which then I would be putting it into a QuickTime and sending it to Denis, and then getting any kind of notes for feedback. Because at that time he was in Germany, or maybe he moved to Germany after Prisoners. So basically he wasn't here in LA writing. So there was a long distance issue and a time issue. So for something like that, there is no real feedback contribution discussing before we do a show and tell. That's what we call it, where the director and picture editor and sometimes a producer would get to watch it for the first time. So that's all Johan. Mm-hmm. Johan was just, I don't know what, he had some people working with him, and I'm sure they collaborate and talk and, that kind of thing. But that's Johan. That was his magic.
Yeah, and you've done some magic on your own too, believe me. So when you look at composing versus editing, is composing the ideal situation to be in versus an editor? I mean, obviously editor, huge part of the film. But would you rather compose versus edit?
Oh yeah, and I mean a lot of my career has been in New York, and I have been very fortunate, very blessed to have been a music editor, working on different shows, and the shows that I've got to work with, and the composers I have gotten to work with, but going back to my original passion. In leaving Berklee with a composition degree, and then studying privately with other composers and orchestrators, that's always been the goal. But Hollywood is it's funny. When I first started working. I'll kind of go backwards a little bit here and say, after I graduated Berklee, I immediately went out to Hollywood and spent 2.5 years trying to get anything and failed. And left Hollywood completely tail between the legs and thinking, I will never work in this business ever. It's over. And I went and I started teaching a couple classes at Berklee. I think I was like a TA or something like that, and just thought, I don't know what to do with my life now. I put all my eggs in one basket, and it didn't work. So what happened was that The dean at the time, the chair of the film scoring department, Don Wilkins, graciously had given me, a couple classes to teach, and he threw me work where I could. And he had, I guess, there was a doctor from Harvard who wanted to do his own radio show, but needed somebody to set up the gear and kind of produce the show. And Don asked if I would do it. I'm like, well, I have nothing else to do. I will say yes. And so I met with this doctor. We started putting an equipment list together and started to, get an idea of how we want to set this up. And, I think we would call it today like a podcast, but back then it was, he was doing like his own radio show. And it would be like in that kind of a podcast format. And during like the first couple of days I started working on it, I got this phone call from a music supervisor in New York City. Now, mind you, I've never been in New York, and to work on a TV show as a music editor. And I had already made this decision that, I guess it's just not going to happen. And I had to really come to terms with it. And it was quite the dark day of the soul thing. It's just like, okay, this is, you kind of accept it. It was a difficult time for me at that time. So to have this now offered to me, I'm like, I've already like kind of grieved this. And do I really want to do this again? And I remember talking with my dad, and he just said to me, what do you have to lose? Good point. So I said yes, and I found out that, this is a true story, but back in the day, you could go onto the lots pretty easily. There was a guard, but, it's not so bad, and I literally had that empty film can or film can filled with, like, fill liter or something, and have a delivery for so-and-so, and I would go and I'd dump the can in the bushes, and I'd walk over to the music department and, introduce myself and talk to people, and I used to make my rounds that way. This was, when I first started working, but nothing was clicking. So when this thing in New York happened, I ended up finding out that it was somebody at Paramount Pictures whom I would go visit quite often, recommended me for the job because he found out I moved back east. And so I called him and thanked him, and he said to me, I'm just delighted. He said, I'm sorry we couldn't help you in LA, but I'm glad we could help you in New York. And so I did this TV series. It was a mid-season replacement as a music editor. There was a couple of irony things there that just was beautiful in one way, because we did 3 episodes before we went to air. The composer wrote 3 episodes of music for it, and the directors and producers finally heard it after recording 3 episodes, and they weren't happy, and they needed a new composer. And so I immediately called the dean and the chair of the film scoring department at Berkeley, because he was also scoring films. And I said, so this is the situation. Get me a demo, like right away. And he got me a cassette tape. And we were at Clinton Recording Studios. We were talking about the situation. I had the tape, and I just said, well, I have somebody I'd like to recommend. Threw the tape in. They listened to his stuff. They said, great, let's call him. And so I got to work with the guy who taught me, firsthand at Berkeley for this TV series, which was just a wonderful way of kind of doing full circle. So I share this story with you to say that after the TV series, it didn't get picked up. And so I had like 3 or 4 months worth of work in the film business for my very first time ever, working as a music editor. It was really exciting. And but then you're freelance, and when you're done working, you're like, now what do I do? One of the picture editors was working on a very low budget feature film. It was a musical, and asked, do I want to work on it? And I said, yes, of course, and worked like crazy to make this film, work on this film. And that film was Dirty Dancing.
Wow.
And that all of a sudden, because of that success, solidified me as a music editor. And I had street cred now. And that's the thing about our business, is that you get typecast. And so you're a music editor, not a composer. I'm like, no, I'm a composer working as a music editor. No, you're a music editor, not a composer. No, I'm a composer. I'm just working as a music editor. So it's, life has its twists and turns, and you go through life and you do your responsibilities and all the things that you're trying to do. In the meantime, trying to build a different type of career. And finally, there's a point in my life that as I'm getting older, if I don't make this a real concerted effort, I have a feeling it's not going to happen. And that's what I did by moving out to LA 10 years ago and really pushed for composing work out here on anything I could do. And things are starting to come along. After doing American Sniper, I've been able to do a few other things. I did this film called Kidnapped for Christ, which was on Showtime, and now Alpha, and from that I've been able, from like American Sniper, I've been doing concerts, and so it's just things are starting to move forward in that direction, and I'm delighted over that.
Yeah, that's well said, and I love that story. And one of the things that I think would be beneficial as a music editor is you could stay back and look at a guy like Sakamoto or Johansson or Atticus Ross, and you could see, you know what, I like the way he does that, or I like the way he does that. And kind of when you go to compose your own things, you kind of can cherry pick, and learn along the way. I mean, I know you're super talented. You're not like an intern here. You're a guy that is a composer that, like you said, you're working as a music editor, which takes enormous talent. But you can also, in a way, use that position to your benefit, where you could say, you know what, I love the way Sakamoto does that, or I love the way Atticus Ross does this. So you can kind of pick and choose these great qualities that these great composers have. Is that an accurate way of looking at that, Joseph?
Derek, you couldn't have said that any better. I look at my life as I've been very, very fortunate to have worked with so many composers, to sit by their side like Marvin Hamlisch, literally sitting 3 feet next to him while he's sitting at the piano, playing the piano, writing in ink, no less, and just doing his stuff and going, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's an interesting approach. And going all the way through with people like Michael Kamen and, you mentioned Atticus. Working with Atticus is just a thrill and a half. And there's so much because he's really introduced, when you look at the Book of Eli score, and this is solely my opinion, I think that score should have been nominated for an Oscar because it was the first of its kind with that kind of sound. And I was like, we use that expression, you're just kind of blown away. I was like, what the heck? It was just great. And he just has a wonderfully unique Atticus perspective. And between, it was just the whole team there. He's just fantastic. And so that, and then Ryuichi, I love Ryuichi. What a wonderful human being. And working with him, he put the soul in music for me, like the heart, like working with him, watching him prep, watching him conduct, because I love conducting. I've been loving conducting since high school and conducted since high school whenever I can. And watch him breathe and embody the music was like, it's imprinting into your own being. You're like, yes, that is how I am going to do this. And you do it with it's your way of doing things. It's not like you go, oh, Atticus uses this plugin, I'm going to use this plugin. No, you do your thing. What you see is how they do their thing. And it gives you a sense when you're in a artistic and creative mode to almost have permission just to do you. And that's the gift of all gifts.
Yeah, that is so well said. And I have to say, and I want to talk, I'm going to get to the wonderful American Sniper and Alpha because I was blown away by them, but I want to just say this, so a lot of times I listen to this music and the movies when I'm on the treadmill. And I'll give you an example of what I'm going to give you an example. You said Book of Eli, completely a sound and a visual like I've never seen before, and I completely agree. Should have been nominated for its music, 100%. I'll give you an example. So, like, I'm watching the movie Solo, right? And John Powell has taken over for Williams, which was a monumental task. But so there's a scene where Solo finally sees the Millennium Falcon for the first time, and as a composer, he's got to hit this pretty hard. Like he can't mess this up because this is like probably the biggest part of the movie. Because, and I don't know, I'm a loser for a lot of reasons, Joseph. I mean, I had tears. I had tears in my eyes. I'm watching this. Powell knocks it out of the park, and I don't know what's worse: the fact that I have tears in my eyes that I'm watching a fictional movie, that a man is looking at a fictional ship. But it's like, it's just, it's why people say, well, why do you love movie scores? And it's like, I go to example, like, so like Book of Eli would be a great example, but it's that scene, like, it's a super scene, but with a crappy, like, composer or the wrong music, it would have just been, The way he hits that mark, and you do the same in Sniper and Alpha, it's like, it's a knockout punch that it wraps its hands around your heart, and it's like, tears down my face, and every single time I watch it. So what does it, and I know you have this beautiful composing background, what is it about music and composing that is your Solo moment, Joseph?
Oh, boy. Well, first, let me just say, you're not the only person who cried at that moment, because I recently just watched the movie. So it's fresh for me. I mean, I was last week. Wow. And I remember that moment. And I, too, got all welled up. It was just brilliant. And so if I'm understanding the question, you're asking, like, what is it that makes those kind of moments, or what is that moment for me? For you. So in other words, like you said, welled up. Is there a particular, like, I know you just love music. I mean, it's clearly born in you. So, like, what is it about composing and making music that you love? Like I said, I don't see things musically like you see them, but what is it about? I mean, it's ingrained in you. You're clearly born with this. You're clearly meant to do it. But what is it about? Like, where does the love come from? Why composing? I mean, you're gifted. You can do it. There's got to be a love coming from somewhere for this. I think it's empathy. Empathy for our humanity. I think that, when, we go through life, and what is life if we're not able to interact with each other and be loving and kind and have our vulnerabilities with each other? I mean, that to me is the purpose. Maybe other people think the purpose of life is to, be the richest or the most powerful or whatever. That's not for me. I don't want to be the richest and the most powerful, but I do want to be able to empathize. I want to be able to reflect our humanity, because that's our journey. And so I think the best way I can describe it is that, I'm doing another Symphonia concert on November 11th. And part of this concert and the preparation was I'm writing this a symphonic piece for inspired by these the families of veterans. I went and interviewed and spent time with 7 different families, and I hear their stories. And not everybody knows these stories that I know, that they've told me. And when you're empathetic, you embody these stories. You feel, if you allow yourself to feel, and allow yourself to put yourself in other person's shoes, and you feel what they're going through, and you have an imagination of what you think it might be like, or how would I be in this? And while I was in that place, and I was working through different sections of this work, there was a couple of days that I felt I just couldn't function. I was so torn up about some of these stories, and someone had a therapist friend had said that you're dealing with residual PTSD, and I'm like, what is that? I didn't even know that. Because I'm not a veteran, I've not experienced what they experienced. But because I can embody and empathize, what happened was I finally just put that into the music. This chaotic, that feeling of what it's like to know the worst of the worst has happened, and it's happened to you. And after about 3 or 4 days of writing and getting it out and playing it back, and this angst that I was carrying lifted because I knew I got it on this music, and whenever I play the music back, it's right there. You feel it. So I think like Quincy Jones had said this, not directly to me, but it was in his, I believe it was in his book, where the music has to move you. If it doesn't move you, it's not going to move anybody else. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
And that's why he's like, the studio is like a sacred place. And it really, really is. So the solo moments are about vulnerability. It's about letting out your soul that's expressed in music. And it might be, now this is where, the other part of my brain goes, where is this really about vibrations? We're all vibrating. We all vibrate at different frequencies, and frequencies that change throughout our moods. And so am I able to transfer what I'm feeling into a musical frequency that you now can feel? That, that gets like scientific on it. I really can't go there and feel like I know what I'm talking about, but I know that part exists. All I can do is go with what I emotionally feel and what's in my gut. And when it's working to a picture, as an actor, studying acting has made me a far better composer, because it's enabled me to open up in an empathetic way. And, studying composition, there's a lot of technical studying. There's a lot of combine this with that, and the ranges of the instruments, and your theory, and, avoid this and avoid that, but these are okay in that circumstance. And, you get a lot of technical stuff, which is great, and we need it. It helps define the musical language that we have all come accustomed to. But there isn't training on empathy. There isn't training on emotional intelligence and emoting, how to really put out what you're feeling and then say it in a way that's palatable for someone else to hear. So, I'm kind of rambling on, but the point is that when I'm looking at a scene, I'm in the scene.
Right.
I am there. How do I feel? What's happening? And that's how I'm able to write what I write. And then a lot of times it works.
And that's so beautifully said, how you phrased that. And I have to say, Alpha for me was just such a beautiful score. And I have to ask you,
thank you.
Why isn't that available on iTunes? I'm so pissed about that. And
it's coming. It's coming.
Oh, thank God. Because I was going to say, and the second thing, because I have a lot of questions for you about Alpha, but the second thing is, did you create the trailer music, or is that someone else that does that?
That is someone else who does that, and sometimes they'll use music from the score, so I don't know. I've not seen the trailer. There was 2 or 3 of them out and about, so, and I think I remember looking at one going, oh, that sounds like one of my cues or a piece of my cue there, but usually there are other composers in town that trailer houses who do the editing will hire those composers to write the music for the trailer.
So it's pretty clear that Denis Villeneuve and the Hughes brothers, namely Albert, think the world of you, or at least think enough of you to trust you with their movies. I mean, so you're doing something right.
Well, thank you. Albert's very kind, generous. He's a good guy. I really love Albert and working with him, and for him to have said yes to let me write some music here is, I'm just very grateful.
So I have to say, like, what a beautiful score, and I hope you'll come back once that score comes out, because I literally could speak with you for 6 hours. Like, there's so much I want to ask you, but for your sanity, I won't put it up today. But when you work with Albert, it's like, it's just such a beautiful movie. And I went twice, and my dad.
Oh my gosh!
Yes,
wow, that's great.
My dad can't hear, and so he's 100% deaf. And when we went to watch the movie, it was so beautiful because I could appreciate the sound, and the words are on the screen for him to appreciate. And I gotta say, it was just beautiful. Like, and this is a spoiler alert, but like at the end when you find out, oh my God, you had me in tears with that score. Oh, when
he sees the village.
Yes, my God, that, and then the way you watch what unfolds with the dog, and it's like, my God, that whole last, I want to say 20 minutes. It's my movie of the year, and a lot of it is to
my gosh, that's really wonderful.
Yes,
that's great.
And a lot of it is to do with what your work is in that movie. It's a work of art, and I'm not just saying this because we're talking, but it's a beautiful score, Joseph.
Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. So that's really great.
So like you're talking about a concert on 11/11. Would you ever, like, during this concert, ever include some of your other pieces from like Alpha or other movies you've done, American Sniper?
That's the goal. Right now, this concert is, I was commissioned by Southeastern University to write this piece for the families of veterans. And the one that we did in March, they also commissioned me to take the score from American Sniper, which was mostly synth. It was a lot of electronics, and orchestrated for symphony. I was able to conduct the Imperial Symphony Orchestra out there in Florida, and also they commissioned me to write another symphonic work, which was based on my interviews with veterans, and I was able to meet and speak with a number of veterans who I'm pleased to say that some of them actually become my friends. But I've met some people I met a woman who was at the Battle of the Bulge. I met another woman who's World War II veteran, Vietnam vets. It just, these men and women, we don't really know what they've been asked to do for us in this country. And, how do I say this? Like, I'm not like a big guy that goes like, give me more guns and give me more war. It's like, no. But at the same time, if you have a bully in the schoolyard, you got to deal with the bully.
Right.
And I'm very grateful that we have men and women who will deal with the bully. And at the same time, then they come back and have to figure out, how do I live? And they have seen things that you and I have not. And they've had to do things that you and I have not had to do. And so my first piece was based off of that, is how do they come back and reacclimate? So what's happening now, just to get back to your question, is that the goal here is to start building a library of these different pieces of music, and also getting the permission from the different film companies. Like, in order to do the American Sniper, I had to go to Clint and ask Clint his permission, and when he said yes, then Warner Brothers, and because it's, when you write a film score, you're writing a film score for them, and it becomes, you own it as a writer, but they own all the publishing. It's, you work for hire for them, so you've got to get their permission to be able to do different concerts. But that's the goal. I want to be able to continue doing that, because I'm finding there are people like you all over this country that love film music. And it's really great to be able to talk with them, talk about, the behind the scenes, the things that really stirred up the music and why the music was written such a way, and then play it. And then they get to hear it in a deeper way. So
yeah, that's really well said. And one of the things that, I had a guest early on, and he wrote Hoosiers, he wrote Rudy, and he said that Jerry Goldsmith, before he scored the movie, said, look, I want to see what this is about. And Jerry Goldsmith was in tears before he saw it, but he did the music to Hoosiers. It's legendary. It's just so moving. So when you score a movie, when you saw Alpha complete, you must have been so proud and so happy. But how do you score that? Do you watch it first without sound? Do you watch pieces? Do you say, you know what, this part needs this type? What's your process?
That's a really great question. My process is to watch the movie. It's every film has a different way of getting into the film. Sometimes you're just talking with the director about the story, and then when you see it, you're like, oh, I get this, I get it. Or sometimes you're just watching it, and the cinematic language is speaking, and the narrative is speaking. And so for me, it is about feelings. What's my way in? How am I empathizing? And once I do that, once I have how I'm connected, then it's translating that, and I'll sit at, sometimes I'll sit at the piano, but sometimes I'll just walk and sing, or sometimes I'll just meditate and be quiet and let whatever, what's there, what's floating, what am I hearing? A lot of times it's what am I hearing? Like the theme for Alpha is something I heard.
Oh, so
and
good.
then I'm like, I've got to write this down. I got to, start getting it. And the way that ended up working was that, Michael Stearns, another wonderful, talented human being, composer, wrote, the score initially, and there was no themes, and we delivered and finished, and the studio wanted to change some of the picture, and then they started to can we do some themes? And so that's when they asked, me to write some themes. And so I needed to write the theme and then play it for Albert just to even see, is this a direction? Is this where we want to go? And so, I really didn't do anything to picture at first. I wrote the whole theme. So that scene where, I'm trying to think now, where Kata is walking away and the dog is following him, that's the theme is there. There was a vocal in there that we had to unfortunately lower in the mix, but on the when you hear it, the vocal is very present. It has that melody, and it's played. The complete theme is played all the way through that. It's just to me, it's one of my beautiful moments of the movie.
Absolutely.
But I ended up playing that theme with solo cello for Albert, and he loved it. He thought this was the direction, and fortunately, that theme was workable enough to be put in different places within the movie.
Yeah, and it's got to feel good on your end to know that. I mean, Albert, I know when I'm watching an Albert Hughes movie, just the way it's shot, right? So,
yep.
So when I see that wolf jump and he's under the ice, and the way that's done in slow mo, that's Albert Hughes. That's exactly what kind of movie it would look like. So,
yeah.
So what was
I love Albert's. Albert has great vision, story wise, and I don't like the look he has. He's got a look, and it's just awesome. I love it. Yeah.
What was your final take on Alpha, the movie itself? I'm sure, obviously, you went to the premiere. I'm sure, right? And
we didn't have a premiere that I'm aware of. We had changes all the way through to the very close to the end of when it was going to be released. So, there is a director's cut that I believe is going to be released soon, and So I'm not going to say anything spoiler alert there, but I'll just say that I love the movie Alpha. I'm just delighted that it came out and people loved it, and yet I think the director's cut is probably my favorite part of it.
Wow! Now you got me. Oh my god! Because I don't love the movie enough as is. And I got to tell you, when I saw that ending, Joseph, tears in my eyes. Like I was like, oh, it's the movie's a work of art, and like all good movies with phenomenal soundtracks. You make it like I always feel like a good score. It's almost mandatory for a good movie. Like it's they complement each other, and I'm going to tell you, it's a work of art. That's me speaking, and that's just how I feel.
Thank you. Thank you. Very kind. I'm glad that you liked it. I'm really I'm delighted about that. Thank you.
So let me ask you. So like, and you talk about incorporating stuff in concert. So like last year, my girlfriend and I went to go see Hans Zimmer. It was so awesome, and I'm dying to go to one of your concerts of the same format. No, seriously, I love watching like people at like I would love to see like an incorporated Alpha and the Veterans Project you're working on and American Sniper. Hans Zimmer kind of does the same. He does a little Batman. He does a little Inception. Is there somebody that stands out to you? So like for me, like I love you. I love like Chris Spellman. I love a lot of my guests, and I think Thomas Newman is just amazing. Is there somebody for you that you're like, my God, this guy's phenomenal, or this woman's phenomenal?
Boy, oh boy, everybody brings to the table something that you absolutely love. It's like a buffet. And you go to this buffet and you go, oh, look at that salad. And you're like, And so, when I listen to Atticus's music, I'm like, oh, I love those electronics and what he's doing there. And when I listen to James Newton Howard, it's the same thing. He's got these amazing melodies and textures. And when I listen to Harry Gregson Williams, it's the same thing. And, when I first heard Alexander Desplat, it was, what was the movie? It was, come on, brain. It was this piano-driven main title, and I was watching it on DVD, and it was probably somewhere, I can't remember what it was. Hold on, I've got to look it up. So, like, if there's going to be an editing thing, this is where you got to save me here. Let me quickly go online and look this up. Painted Veil, didn't have to look it up.
Oh, good.
That score it knocked my socks off.
Yeah.
So I listened to the main title, I stopped, and I'm like, what was that? And I went back and played the main title again.
Wow.
It was just listen to it. Go get that score and you listen to that and tell me there's not emotion all over the place. And, there's emotion in the writing and then there's emotion in the performance. And it's like, it's just beautiful. So, and Thomas Newman you mentioned. I mean, there are probably a dozen other composers I'm forgetting to mention, but it literally is like a buffet. Everybody brings their favorite plate. Their favorite dish, and we all get to sample it. So I'm always looking out for like what's on the buffet this Sunday.
Right. And I have to tell you that I got laughed at because Chris Spellman's a really good guy, but he laughed at me with this question, right? So he said, I said to him, and I was being sincere, like I think I'm a pretty educated guy. I know my movies. I see everything. I said, you guys are the modern day. Like Bach and Beethoven. He goes, you're crazy. Like, he's like, you're crazy. And he started laughing. And he's like, those guys are he was like, he wasn't offended, but he's like, you're over the top. Like, he's being funny. He's being a good guy. But like, I sincerely meant it. Like, you guys are like, look at your work and his work and Thomas Newman and Zimmer and John Williams and the late James Horner. Like, it's phenomenal. Like and you guys are orchestrating movies which people love. I don't know, like I do feel that way. I feel like you guys are the modern day Bach and Beethoven. I'm not comparing abilities. I'm just saying to get people to love music. I sure as shit stand behind that statement. Yeah.
No, I get it. And I don't think I would ever compare myself to any of those great composers, in the sense of they're the masters and define the language that we use. Like, they created that language, and we all go, that's the language we want to use, right? So it's like the rules of grammar. Well, they've created the rules of music for us to follow, and but having said that, we're able to now do concerts like they used to do concerts, and we're offering something different to listen to, because how many more times do you want to listen to Tchaikovsky or Wagner, or, how many more times do you want to go listen to Beethoven? I think there's a place for that, and we love listening to that and go to concerts for it. And then there's a place for, let's go listen to a film score. Let's go watch a live concert and see David Newman conducting and watch the live concert shown to film. I mean, it's just another brand of entertainment that enhances like what our experiences. So I understand that. It's like, but at the same time, I can understand the other side of the point. Is like, there's no way you're ever going to compare me to those guys.
Right. And but I got to say though, like the people at those concerts, like I went to Hans Zimmer, and then I went to the man that he scores the Game of Thrones, Ramin.
Oh yeah,
and Ramin, yeah, and. I mean, people were going nuts. They loved it. Like, I'm telling you, that's the new, like, that's going to be, like, the thing now. Instead of going to, like, and I love vocalists. Like, I'm not saying that. But, like, it is so awesome if you're in love with movies to hear you guys just at your best and doing your work. There's so much to be said for that. There really is.
Yeah, it's really, it's a very exciting thing on both sides of the aisle, if you will, meaning like as an audience member, I enjoy that. And as the conductor, I enjoy that, It's just a great experience all around.
I have to say, you brought up your dad earlier. What does Dad think of all your success and all your wonderful work?
Well, it's interesting. Unfortunately, my dad passed away 16 years ago.
No, I'm sorry to hear that.
That's okay. Thank you. And really, so there's a part of my life too where I left the film business somewhere in the early 90s, and much to my dad's surprise, when I got back into it, he was ill at the time where I got back into it, and so he never really saw any of this success. And so that's disappointing in some ways, because I think he would have absolutely loved the journey. But that's how life works sometimes, but and my mom is alive, and she's been around and is just loving it. And it's funny, I was just back in Boston because my mom had just had her 80th birthday, and she had told me she had just seen the movie, but it was during her birthday party, so I didn't get a chance to say, well, what did you think? So I'll have to call her and find out.
Yeah, and I hate to sound overwhelming, but I'm being very sincere here. The soundtrack for Alpha it was such a wonderful moment for me, because I love your material, and it blew me away. Like, I love Hughes, I love what you do, and my dad is a decorated, fully disabled Vietnam veteran. And I hate when people, and I'm not getting too far off, but I hate when people say, "Oh, the movie is nothing but subtitles." You know what? Some of the best movie in history are nothing but subtitles. And my dad being 100% deaf, like, I was thrilled that it was 100% subtitles, so he could appreciate. And sometimes I wish my dad could hear more, so he could hear this wonderful music that people like you are putting out. So,
thank you.
Yeah, I'm so happy for all your success. Is there anything you wanted to promote, Joseph? Is there anything you wanted to get out there?
Oh, boy. I would say, there's a Symphonia concert. If there's anybody in the Polk County in Florida, we're doing the Symphonia concert on Veterans Day at Polk Theater at 2:30. brought to you by the Southeastern University, and it's for everyone, and it's a focus of the families of veterans, and it's a wonderful venue. And I'd say, come on out. We'll have a great time. It's going to be a really good. It's going to be a really good afternoon.
Yeah, and you have the opportunity to work with, we mentioned the Hughes brothers, Clint Eastwood. I mean, is that how it should be? I mean, so on all movies, are you always, you're in connection with the director? And I have to believe from just seeing some of your other interviews. By the way, I watch a lot of interviews to prepare for mine, and you had one a couple years ago, and boy, that guy was so good with this. He was phenomenal with his questions. Like, usually when I watch interviews, it's like a car wreck, right? It's like the host has overslept, or like, or somebody says, "Hey, you're from Seattle. How about them Seahawks?" Like, it's right. But the guy was so good. Like, you could tell he knew his music and his movie scores. But I guess my long-winded question is, when a guy like Clint Eastwood gives you the green light, when a guy like Hughes gives you the green light, and I got to tell you, I hate to go back to Chris Spellman, but he's friends with James Gray, who's a director. You're kind of hooked to these directors. Like when these directors are looking for somebody to score their movies, I have to believe, knock on wood here, that Albert Hughes is thinking of you down the road. Like you're the guy that he's probably thinking. I mean, that's got to mean a lot to you, though, doesn't it? Isn't that the ultimate? Isn't that the ultimate? What's the word I'm looking for? Compliment.
Yes, it's a compliment without a doubt. But I'll tell you, Derek, what's really more important is the relationship.
Right.
And, working with Albert, that relationship is wonderful. And, when he does his next one, I do hope he calls. But I do understand that there are times where, like, Clint Eastwood has gone on to do other movies, and I've not received that call. But I get it because, my part of the buffet is not what he's needing.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So,
Yes.
And so, the relationship is solid because he's been saying yes to these American Sniper concerts for me, which I am just so very grateful. I call up and I say, so-and-so would like for us to do this concert. Would you be okay with that? And and then the word gets to Clint, and then I get an email saying, he said okay. And I'm like, how awesome is that? So to me, it's more about the relationship. If I ever get to write music again for Albert or for Clint or, whomever director I work with, it's an honor, and I hope that we're able to build, you build this friendship relationship, you're working together for a common goal, and that to me is where it's all about, and where it's that's awesome. That's the part of it.
Yeah, relationships. What a great, and your relationships and what you're doing with veterans. My God, Joseph, it speaks volumes about your character.
Oh, well, thank you. I got to say, this came to me. And I'm so grateful that, I'll just mention his name. Dr. Craig Collins over at the Southeastern University was the one that called me and asked. He was the one that had this idea. Would you be willing to do a American Sniper concert for veterans in Polk County? And I'm like, my first response was, have you heard the score? It's not exactly something you want to sit through as a concert piece, It was a lot of atmospheric, tonal, electronic stuff with some strings and low woodwinds and horns. I mean, and but he had a vision for it, and he said yes. And what would it take to put it into orchestra? And I'm like, well, let's keep on talking. So before we did that concert, it was like a year in the making.
Wow.
Yeah, and then now the second one, we did the first one in March. This one's coming up in November. All that groundwork was already laid, and so we have a process now. So I'm very grateful that Dr. Collins had reached out to me and asked, and we've developed a friendship now over the years, and it's great. And I hope that we get to do more of these Symphonia series concerts. And I will just say this, Polk County, there are 70,000 veterans in that county. 70,000. That's a lot. And at the same time, I will say that while I was there meeting these veterans, I also got to meet some of the leadership of the town of Lakeland, and these people really care about each other. They have a great community. They, I just see the group of people who care and love each other and work towards building a better place to live.
Yes.
And that's, to be invited in to, bring something to the buffet, to use that analogy again, that's an honor. That's I'm just so grateful.
Well, it's an opportunity you've earned, and our veterans are the best of us, and they're going to hear one hell of a composer give an awesome concert.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You've given me almost an hour and a half of your time. I have one last question. So,
Sure.
Do you ever watch a movie, and I don't want to be like a half-empty kind of guy, but do you ever say to yourself, "Ooh, I don't think I would have gone with that piece of music for that scene," or you know what, this scene probably would. Are you ever critical? And you don't have to mention names or anything like that. I'm not trying to be a gotcha question.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I think what you're asking is, have I ever watched a movie or a TV show or a scene and the music is just not working for me?
Right.
And I'd have to say yes, that does happen. But it's never with a critical eye toward the composer, because I know that may not have been the composer's thing.
Right.
For example, in Alpha, where I mentioned that scene where Kata is leaving, he's got to go back. He wants to go back to his family, and he's telling Alpha, you go, and you got to go away. You go to your family, and Alpha's following him. Now, when I listen to that piece of music, I kind of cringe a little bit, because I was asked to lower the vocal, and not by the director, but by somebody else. I'm not going to get into any of that. But I had, you're there to serve, and so you have to comply. But musically, I'm like, oh, no, you're, that vocal is the heart and soul, is just everything in it. And then the second part of the vocal, we actually just muted. And, so it wasn't my intention. It was something that, part of being in service to the film, you comply. And so it's not what you think is your best representation. It functions, it works, but you had a different vision. And so when I see something that's not quite gelling on screen for me, or maybe feels like it could have been, like it didn't hit the emotional mark or something, I know it's not one person's responsibility. I know there are a lot of people that get involved, and, it just doesn't always work out to be the best souffle you thought it was going to be, and that's okay, because that's how life rolls, But yeah, that happens, and I get it.
Joseph, do actors ever involve themselves in the scoring process, whether to say thank you or hey man, that was fantastic, or to make changes? Do they ever submit themselves into that process?
Yeah, sometimes. Like for American Sniper, Bradley Cooper was very involved.
Yeah.
And, my first meeting was sitting on a couch with Clint and Bradley Cooper. And I'm like, what just happened to me? And so, yes, like there was a scene in American Sniper where, Chris Kyle was this little boy. Boy, how do I set the scene up? I don't know if you remember it, but basically, there was a guy that came out with is it an RGB over the shoulder kind of a thing?
Right.
And Chris shot the guy and took him out. So this kid comes out from around the corner and picks it up and puts it on his shoulder, and this is just a little boy.
Oh, I remember this scene. Yes.
And so Chris Kyle's like going, put it down, because he didn't want to shoot a boy.
Right,
you know?
right.
And it just goes back and forth, and the tension builds, and eventually the kid drops it. I had a cue there that supported all of what I just described. And Bradley felt like the cue was too much, and we needed to be more in Chris's head and more in Chris's heart. And so we didn't use that cue.
Wow.
So to ask, and I think it was a right decision.
Right.
I don't think, I never felt like, oh, well, gee, that scene's not working anymore. I think I don't know, maybe at the very end we could have used a little extra push, but I mean, come on, that tension was already there. And
right.
it's a fine line between knowing, is it already on the screen? Because if it's there, music does not need to be there.
Right.
And sometimes, something like that, we could have it's like salt and pepper. Do I add a little bit more salt to this? Because then you could oversalt it, and then it's like, not working. So all this to say is that, there are times where actors will definitely add input depending upon how invested they are in the project, and or if it's afterwards and you're seeing them at a premiere or something like that, or a screening, they'll say something like, I did this film called 11/11. It's a comedy, and now it's actually doing some film festivals right now. But I've not met the lead actress, Krista Allen, but I was messaging with her back and forth, telling her about our premiere and blah blah blah, and she wasn't able to there. And I told her, I wrote the score, and she said, well, her character is named as Andromeda, and she says, well, does Andromeda have a sassy theme? And I said, you betcha, because it's a sassy character,
Right.
So actors, they're putting their heart into what they're doing, and so of course they want to know, how is it supported, how is it coming across.
Sure. So, is there a date for the soundtrack to my movie of the year, for a release date for the awesome Alpha soundtrack?
Not that I'm aware of. I turned in the score, Michael Stern's music and my music, 2 weeks ago into Sony. And so I don't know what their process is at this point in terms of getting it online to their they have a label, an online label that I don't know the process and how long it takes for it to get uploaded and then populated to iTunes and all the other, Google and Amazon and all that. So I don't know how long that takes.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'll be the first one purchasing it. I'll tell you that, because every morning I get up, I check to see if it's there. And, I have to say, Joseph, good luck to you, not only like in the present and your wonderful concert, but in the future. I see huge things for you down the road.
Oh, thank you so much, Derek. I really appreciate that you reached out, and I'm grateful to spend this time with you and to talk about, something that I just absolutely love doing with my life, and I'm just delighted that you've had a wonderful experience from it. It makes me very happy to know that you loved Alpha. That's awesome. That's really great.
He's the very kind Joseph Debisi. Joseph, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you, Derek.